My family burst out laughing at the reunion. I'm proud of all my children, except the loser. If you've ever been humiliated by the very people who were supposed to love you most, this might be the story you've been waiting for. I spent nearly a year's salary on the car. It took my father 17 seconds to look at it and look right through me. There's a kind of silence in high-end elevators that makes you feel like you're about to pitch your soul to a boardroom. That's how it felt standing in my Manhattan apartment lobby with a silver-ribboned key box clutched in my hand. The concierge had smiled politely, not knowing I was about to trade a year of my life for a man's approval. Not just any man. My father. I'd wrapped the box myself. The ribbon was navy, his favorite color, and the box was matte black, understated. Classic, just like he preferred. Everything about the gift, the presentation, the timing, calculated. Not because I lacked spontaneity, but because I knew who I was dealing with. Gregory Carter didn't do emotion. He did precision, numbers, and legacy. Anything beyond that was fluff, weakness, noise. But today was different, or so I hoped. Today, I was going to give him something even he couldn't dismiss. A brand new Mercedes S-Class. Black exterior, camel interior, every premium feature his country club friends bragged about. I remembered him eyeing one months ago and saying, if I ever bothered with indulgence, it'd be something like that. So I bothered, and I paid, with more than money. The drive from New York to Connecticut was crisp, bright early June. Windows cracked just enough to breathe in possibility. I had imagined the moment a dozen ways. He'd open the box, pause, maybe even blink with surprise. Say something like, you really didn't have to, but thank you. A nod, a pat on the shoulder. Something that told me the last 32 years weren't invisible. The Carter estate came into view, all symmetry and stone. It was the kind of house that looked like it was designed by a man who didn't know how to say, welcome. The hedges were shaped like trophies. The doorbell chimed like a cathedral. When the door opened, my father stood there in a collared sweater and pressed khakis, like a catalog ad for stern tradition. You're early, he said, glancing at his watch. No smile. No hello. I know. I brought your Father's Day gift. I handed him the key box like it weighed nothing, when in fact it was the heaviest thing I'd carried all year. He opened it slowly. The Mercedes logo caught the morning light. His brow lifted, not with joy, but with calculation. This some kind of joke? He asked flatly. I guided him to the window. There it was, parked perfectly at the end of the circular drive, a black mirror of luxury gleaming against the trimmed green lawn. His lips pressed together. He stepped outside without a word, walked a slow circle around the car, crouched to check the rims, tapped the hood lightly, the kind of inspection he gave new properties, not gifts. I followed a step behind, heart in my throat. It's fully insured, I offered. Title's in your name. He opened the driver's door, sat down, adjusted the mirrors. Steering's probably too light, he muttered, starting the engine. I stood in the driveway as he pulled out, drove a lazy loop around the cul-de-sac. The sound of the engine was butter smooth, muted. When he returned, he parked it in the garage. Not the driveway. The garage. Away from sight. He stepped out and locked it. You must be doing well to waste money like this. That was it. I followed him inside, the silence sticky. Maggie, my mother, greeted me in the foyer with a quick hug and a whisper of, he's just being himself, honey. Her way of smoothing over years of splinters. As I climbed the stairs to the guest room, the familiar ache returned. Low, persistent like tendinitis in my chest. I passed the photos lining the hallway. James at Princeton. Grace in her charity gala dress. Not a single one of me past 8th grade. In the room they always gave me, sterile. Too neat. I sat on the edge of the bed and reached into my purse. The envelope was still there. Sealed, heavy in its stillness. Gregory Carter may have looked through the Mercedes, but what he really looked through? was me. Everyone played their part at the Carter family gathering. I was the daughter they rarely mention but never forgot to invite. The late afternoon sun cast a golden sheen over the Carter estate's manicured lawn, like it too had been coached on how to appear perfect for this day. Linen-clothed tables stretched across the back garden, each topped with white peonies and hand-lettered place cards. Staff in crisp black uniforms circulated trays of rosé and finger foods, while chamber music played from unseen speakers. It all screamed tastefully orchestrated intimacy, with a price tag only my father would dare whisper aloud. I arrived alone, as expected. A few heads turned, eyes scanning my dress, then flicking away like I was a decorative mistake no one wanted to acknowledge too long. "Lovely to see you, Natalie," someone said with a thin smile and champagne teeth. "Still in New York?" another asked, already turning toward someone more photogenic before I could answer. The Mercedes was parked center front, gleaming in the light like a trophy. Not in the garage where he'd hidden it the night before, but now, proudly displayed for guests to admire. I stood frozen, watching as Walter Peterson, my father's longtime business rival turned occasional drinking buddy, circled it with impressed nods. "Gregory," I heard him call. "You finally gave in to decadence?" My father approached, chuckling. "Sometimes you reward yourself, when you've earned it." He patted the roof like a hunter admiring a fresh kill. I didn't flinch, but I felt the sting. The car wasn't a reward. It was a damn offering. And somehow I just watched it get rebranded like everything else that ever passed through Gregory Carter's hands. Andrew arrived to a small wave of applause. My older brother, chiseled jaw, navy sport coat, and the air of someone who believed attention was his birthright, strode across the lawn with his wife in tow. Gregory clasped his shoulder with two firm pats, then launched into a booming recount of Andrew's latest bold real estate pivot, some mixed-use complex in Brooklyn. "He saw potential where others saw liability," my father proclaimed. "That's the Carter instinct." I stood 3 feet away. No acknowledgement, no nod, just the faintest glance, like checking whether an old tree was still standing in the yard. Someone I barely remembered leaned toward me. "Your father must be proud of all his kids. He's saying as much out loud, you know." I smiled politely and retreated toward the tent's edge. The music swelled as I passed Melissa, my younger sister, who was deep in conversation with an investor's wife about her volunteer work. When our eyes met, she gave me a quick wave, then promptly turned away. She'd always played peacekeeper, until neutrality became self-preservation. A waiter offered me a drink. I took the champagne flute, mostly to keep my hands occupied. I didn't sip. I watched. Observed the way my family bent toward the flame of Gregory's approval, careful not to burn themselves, but always trying to stay warm. That's when I heard it. Just behind the hedge, Gregory's voice, sharp and amused. "Some people need to show off to be seen." I didn't need to ask who he meant. I stepped back into shadow, letting the laughter float past me. I hadn't brought the car to be seen. I'd brought it to be enough. And I wasn't. "Lurking doesn't suit you," a voice said behind me. Grace, perfect Grace. Her dress was soft green, her heels neutral, her makeup barely there and flawless. She used to be the family's golden niece, the one Gregory introduced like a prized intern. Now she stood beside me like a woman who knew better. "He's doing it again," she said, claiming credit. "Said you finally learned taste because of his example." I didn't respond. Couldn't. "He's always been this way," she added, sipping her wine. "Builds his name on the backs of other people's work. You're not the first." I turned to face her. "But I might be the last." Grace tilted her head. "Careful. I've seen what happens to the ones who try." The lawn had grown louder with chatter, the click of glasses, the curated laughter of people invested in keeping things pretty, in keeping the truth buried. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. She leaned in, close enough that her breath grazed my cheek. "If you decide to burn it all down," she whispered, "I'll testify." I'm proud of all my kids, except the loser. The line is a punch, except it's not impulsive. It's surgical. The chandeliers above the garden shimmered like a constellation summoned for show. Candlelight flickered across crystal and porcelain, glinting off silverware aligned to the millimeter. Dinner at the Carter estate had never been just a meal. It was a performance. Each course a movement in Gregory's symphony of power. Each guest a carefully selected instrument, polished and tuned to harmonize with his lead. I took my seat at the far end of the table, 2 places away from the help and an ocean apart from my father's orbit. Maggie sat at the opposite head, serene and frostbitten in a dove-gray dress. Andrew and Melissa flanked Gregory like heirs in a Renaissance painting. Grace was nestled near the business elite, her expression unreadable. Champagne flowed. Laughter did too. Soft. Well-rehearsed. I chewed through the amuse-bouche without tasting it, counting the steps I'd rehearsed in my head. Not just what I would say, but when. How. With what tone. Because unlike the last time this happened, when I cried in my car and told myself to forget it, this time I carried truth in my purse. Gregory rose just before the main course arrived, his brandy glass catching light as if it too knew how to pose. A toast, he said. Silence came instantly, trained silence, the kind earned through decades of discipline and money. I look around this table and I see the future, he said, eyes sweeping over Melissa, then Andrew. I see intelligence, drive, grace. A pause. Melissa's work with the foundation has elevated our name in meaningful, lasting ways. And Andrew, what can I say? Turning that neglected waterfront property into the crown jewel of Harborview. That's vision. People clapped. Walter Peterson gave an approving grunt. I didn't move. Gregory smiled, sipped, then placed the glass down, slow and deliberate. I'm proud of all my kids, he said. Then his gaze settled on me. Except the loser. There was a beat of stillness so pure it sucked the warmth from the air. A few guests chuckled uncomfortably, assuming they'd missed the joke. Others cleared their throats, glanced down at their plates. No one said my name. He sat down, completely at ease. I pushed my chair back, not hard enough to scrape, just enough to shift the air. I stood. No trembling, no clearing my throat. Just me, in my navy dress, the one my mother said made me look serious but not angry. I reached into my purse. My hand brushed velvet lipstick, a folded tissue, then the cool, sharp rectangle of the sealed envelope. I placed it on the center of the table. Gregory didn't even blink. For 32 years, I began, my voice clear, not loud. I've been trying to earn something that wasn't mine to begin with. No one breathed. Your blood. Gasps. A fork clinked against china. I looked at him. Not as a daughter, not anymore. As a woman looking at a man who'd made her small for sport. But now I don't need it, I said. Here's the proof. I tapped the envelope once, gently, then turned. No dramatics, no final stare. Just the deliberate, practiced steps of someone walking out of a prison with the key still warm in her hand. Inside my clutch, the spare key fob to the Mercedes nestled between a mint and a lipstick tube. I didn't look back. Not even when I heard chairs scrape. Not when someone whispered my name. Not when he shouted it. Natalie! Too late. He screamed my name as I pulled away. But for the first time in my life, I didn't stop. The engine's hum softened the blow. I didn't look back. Just followed the winding Connecticut road until it blurred into interstate lights. The car still smelled like new leather and expensive silence, but the weight in my chest had changed. It wasn't grief. Not anymore. It was something quieter, sharper, freedom maybe, or shock. I pulled into the Boston Hotel around 11 p.m., the kind of place business travelers favor. Efficient lighting, neutral walls, soft carpet that dampens all footsteps. I handed the keys to the valet without a word. They had no idea the car was a war trophy, that I was the loser. until I wasn't. In the room, I didn't change, didn't turn on the TV. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, staring at the phone vibrating on the nightstand. 17 missed calls, then 24, then 32. The family thread was exploding. I muted it, then unmuted it, then muted it again. Grace was the first to text. Grace, are you okay? Dad lost his mind after you left. Everyone saw. It was brutal. Then Melissa. Melissa. Voicemail. Nat, I don't know what to say. What you did. Jesus, I'm not saying it wasn't deserved, just, wow. He's spiraling. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know. I wish I could talk to you before everyone else does. I didn't listen to the rest. Just saved it. It didn't sound like loyalty, but it didn't sound like cruelty either. Maggie. Text. I was never meant for you to find out that way. That way. As if there had ever been a gentle delivery method for betrayal. I stared at the screen until the light blurred. Then, slowly, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked in the to field for nearly 2 minutes before I typed the name I'd rehearsed for weeks. Thomas Whitman. Engineering consultant. Former MIT student. My mother's before. My possible something. Email. Subject. I believe I may be your daughter. Dear Mr. Whitman, I hope this message finds you well. I understand this may come as a shock. I recently underwent DNA testing and discovered Gregory Carter is not my biological father. Based on records and timelines, you may be. If this is unsettling, I understand. But if you're open to a conversation, I would be grateful. Natalie Carter, I hit send. I stared at the screen. I got up. I walked to the window and watched traffic flicker across Boston Harbor. I came back. Inbox. One new. I believe I may be your daughter. I blinked, opened it. Dear Natalie, I had no idea. I don't know what to say except that I'm not upset, just surprised. Deeply. If the timing and facts align, well, I'd like to know more. I'm in Manhattan next month for a conference. Would you be open to meeting for coffee? Thomas, I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled. Too long. Too fast. I stared at his words, reading them not for content but for tone. No judgment, no denial. Just willingness. I lay in bed, shoes finally kicked off, hands laced behind my head. I tried to sleep. Then curiosity won. I opened the Carter family group chat. Natalie Carter has been removed from the group. He had my eyes. I had his restraint, and neither of us knew what to say at first. The cafe near Central Park was the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Tucked between a florist and a rare bookshop, with a narrow entry and low lighting, it had no ambitions of being trendy, just steady. It reminded me of Grace somehow. Humble and watchful. Thomas Whitman was already seated at a small table by the window, a cappuccino in front of him, untouched. He stood when he saw me. Natalie? He said, not as a question. His voice was softer than I expected, like a carefully tuned piano. Hi, I replied. We both hesitated. Then we sat. Up close, it was undeniable. The eyes, the lines around the mouth, the exact tilt of a head when listening closely. He folded his hands slowly, just like I did when formulating a response. I didn't want this to be uncomfortable, he said after a pause. It already is, I replied, then smiled. But that's okay. He chuckled once, grateful for the honesty. We talked. Not about the obvious, not yet. Instead, work. His career in infrastructure design, my life in finance. The little things that felt too small to carry meaning, but somehow did. He liked black coffee with cinnamon, so did I. He compulsively checked the weather before packing. I scrolled market trends before brushing my teeth. You always know when a storm's coming, he said. Even if you pretend not to. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds about right. There were no sweeping declarations, no tears, No dramatic apologies for a past neither of us shaped, just presence and patience. Before we parted, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small box. Inside was a carved wood pendant, smooth and oval, with a sunburst etched at the center. My mother made it for me when I graduated MIT, he said. She used to say, "You don't need a name to belong, but this one is yours if you want it." I ran my thumb over the wood, not speaking. "It's not an inheritance," he added with a faint smile. "It's a beginning." That evening, back in Connecticut, I met Maggie at a small cafe just off the main square. The place had changed since I was a child. New owners, new decor. But the scent of baked vanilla and rain-soaked pavement still clung to the walls. She looked tired. Not in the aesthetic sense. Maggie Carter was never anything less than composed, but in the way someone looks when they've been holding a lie too long. "It bends the spine." "You ordered mint tea," I said as I sat down. She blinked. "I always do." "I know," I replied. "I just never understood how you drank it with cream." A breath passed between us, a quiet peace offering. "I was 23, she began, her voice low, "and already being courted like property. Your father, Gregory, offered certainty, status. He didn't know. At first. Then he did. And you stayed." "I stayed," she said, meeting my eyes. "Because I was told it would be better for you. For everyone. That love didn't matter as long as we looked right." I shook my head. "You protected your life. Not mine." She flinched but didn't argue. "Every dance recital," I added quietly. "Every parent day at school. You knew why he wouldn't show up. And you let me think it was my fault." Her eyes filled, but didn't spill. "I was scared. Of him. Of being alone." "I know." She reached across the table. "I never stopped loving you." I didn't touch her hand, but I didn't move away either. We sat like that, in the dim of the cafe with too many years between us and no roadmap ahead. Finally, I pulled out my phone and opened the forwarded email from earlier that morning. From Gregory Carter's attorney, Ms. Carter. Per the terms of property gifted under implied consent, Mr. Carter hereby demands the return of the 2023 Mercedes S-Class. I held the screen out. Maggie read. Her mouth tightened. "He'll never stop trying to control the narrative," she whispered. "No," I said, pocketing the phone, "but I'm not in it anymore." That night, back at the hotel, I wrote to my attorney. Email. Subject. Carter vehicle respond with the DNA report attached. Add, you cannot repossess what you never gave. This year, there was no grand table, no seat assignment. Just people who saw me and pulled up a chair. Grace's apartment smelled like cinnamon and roasting vegetables, the kind of scent that lingered in sweaters and memories. Her dining table wasn't mahogany or 12 feet long. It didn't seat 20. It sat 6, with chairs that didn't match, and placemats made by her youngest during craft time. Melissa was at the stove, awkwardly but earnestly stirring gravy. She'd shown up with 2 pies, a bottle of wine, and the kind of quiet that comes after shedding armor. "I moved out," she said while mashing sweet potatoes. "A week ago, I couldn't defend him anymore." There wasn't a dramatic pause. Just that clean, simple truth. "I thought if I stayed close enough," she added, "maybe I could fix it. Or soften him. Turns out, some things don't bend. They just break." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We passed the salt and shared stories about our worst meals, our best escapes, and the terrible blind dates Grace used to set us up on in college. Grace's kids ran barefoot in the hallway, sticky with frosting, occasionally darting into the kitchen for bites of stuffing. Later, we gathered on the floor with dessert plates balanced on knees. Grace poured cider. I opened a small package that had arrived that morning. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Thomas. Inside was a folded letter and a photo. Him, his wife, 3 children, a dog. all standing in front of their Colorado home with light jackets and full smiles. Natalie, thank you for reaching out. You didn't have to, but I'm glad you did. I don't know what the future looks like, but if you're willing, I'd like to keep learning who you are. Enclosed is a photo, not to prove anything, but to invite something. You are welcome here. Always. Thomas. I placed the photo on the coffee table. Everyone leaned in. Melissa smiled softly. Grace squeezed my hand. A few minutes later, I slipped away into Grace's bedroom, opened a small velvet box I'd brought from the hotel. Inside was the Carter family signet ring. Gold. Heavy. Cold. I stared at it for a long moment, then shut the lid. When I came back out, I was wearing Thomas's pendant. It rested just above my collarbone, warm from my skin. I like that on you, Grace said. I nodded. So do I. We took a group photo, me, Melissa, Grace, and the kids. Grace printed it instantly on her Polaroid and handed me a marker. I wrote one word beneath it. Family. We pinned it to her photo wall, next to a child's drawing of a unicorn and a postcard from Rome. Just as I sat back down, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Gregory. We both know you'll regret this. I stared at the message, then deleted it, without opening it. For years, she had lived like a ghost at her own family's table, spoken of in half sentences, tolerated but never embraced. Yet when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't rage that brought justice, but clarity, and the quiet courage to walk away. When injustice is met with unwavering truth, the illusion of power collapses on its own weight. Natalie didn't burn bridges. She simply stopped walking toward the ones that never opened for her. Sometimes freedom is not in fighting to stay, but in choosing to leave, with your name, your truth, and your head held high. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment 1 if you've ever had to choose yourself over someone who never truly saw you.